I want to discuss with you today the distinction between theory and ideology. Theory refers to an interrelated set of concepts. Now, a concept, as you'll see in the previous slide that you can go through on your own, refers to an idea that we can somehow measure. So, social power or recidivism or stigma. Those are all concepts that are used in sociology relatively commonly. Now, so we have this interrelated set of concepts, and the idea of this interrelation is to provide some kind of an explanation of a given societal phenomenon of interest, right? So we really need the building blocks of this. And so we've got concepts as one building block, and we have hypotheses as another building block of theory. So a hypothesis refers to a formal statement of a relationship between two or more variables. You have an independent variable, which is sometimes called a predictor variable, that determines in the hypothesis the value of the dependent variable. It is the variable that depends upon the value of the independent variable. So these hypotheses can have a set of relations, right? They can be positive relations, whereas X increases, Y also increases. They can have inverse relations, whereas X increases, Y decreases. Or there may be no relationship. In other words, a null hypothesis, where as X increases, Y simply does nothing. So for a hypothesis to form part of a theory, it has to be first tested, and that null hypothesis that we talked about, where Y does nothing as X increases or decreases, must be refuted, right? So that really is how we start to form this interrelated set of hypotheses. So if you have a single hypothesis, that doesn't constitute a theory. That's just a hypothesis. It's a building block of a theory. Now, thus we could look at how Carr et al. Define this, the authors of your text. They argue that a theory is really, quote, a sequential argument consisting of a series of logically related statements put forward to illuminate some element of social life, end quote. To that, we could add that it could also be economics or politics or so forth. As you look at sociology, you'll find that sociology includes lots of other disciplines, or it's in the center, surrounded by these other disciplines, whether it's anthropology, political science, economics, or psychology. So all of those actually are connected in some way to sociology. Another characteristic of theory is that it's falsifiable. And this is a very important characteristic, because that means that you can test the hypotheses in a theory, and if enough of them come back to be null hypotheses, the theory is going to be discarded or lose favor in academia and gradually erode away. That is very distinct from an ideology, as we'll see. Theories, thus, are subject to modification, and thus research which tests these new hypotheses can help build theory or strengthen the theory as it adjusts to modern day conditions. Oftentimes, theories tend to grow over time. So that leaves us with a little bit of a degree of uncertainty. Theories do not provide what we could say is an absolute truth. They are not the ultimate truth. And because of that, they're falsifiable, they are subject to research, they're subject to tests, they welcome tests, and so forth. Now, let's look at how this contrasts or compares with ideology. Both theory and ideology have a set of assumptions about the social world. All theories will perhaps at their base have some kind of assumption, perhaps even about human nature, that human beings interact, and so forth. There's going to be lots of assumptions that they don't need to necessarily go in depth to explain. They provide explanations. Both theory and ideology provide a set of explanations. They systematize ideas, and they suggest a set of causal relations. Now, this is really on the surface. We can dig deeper and see that there are some big differences between theory and ideology. For instance, ideology is non-falsifiable. If you argue with an ideologue by presenting them data, you will not get anywhere. You're, in a sense, wasting your time because the barrier of cognitive dissonance will be so strong that the individual will not be willing to critically assess new data that might disagree with his or her ideology. And that's because ideologies are characterized with absolute certainty. They know because they know. Data, research, and evidence are irrelevant unless they confirm the ideology. And thus, ideologies are riddled with high amounts of internal inconsistency, whereas theories, because they're tested, have a high level of internal consistency. Ideologies have a low level of internal consistency. Thus, ideology avoids tests, while theory welcomes tests. And that's the critical thing to remember about theory and ideology. Thank you.